I'd stay a lot of the time in bed and breakfasts or youth hostels, but mostly B&Bs, because I actually quite like getting in a B&B, having a shower, and then round the corner to the pub. And there's some of the characters that I used to meet on the hill, off the hill rather, in the B&Bs, I've written about in a chapter called Winston Churchill and the Sticky Bomb. And this is God's honest truth. As Dr. Johnson once said to Boswell as they were rummaging through the ashtrays of the Clackaig Inn looking for a few tabs they could cannibalise for a rollie, "Then us bozzers, the problem with bed and breakfast joints is that you have to share them with all kind of kith, kin and assorted mankind, and stat my victuals, but what a rum lot some of them kith and kin can be." Rum is not the word. I was once walking in the Welsh borders and stopped the night at a small B&B. It was clean and welcoming, smelt of home cooking, had fat armchairs and enough Reader's Digest condensed books to keep you occupied for a couple of years. And if you didn't like Neville Shute or Nancy Mitford, you could also opt for bound copies of the Radnorshire Bloodstock Journal, 1938 to 1942, or Lives of the Great Methodist Preachers, all 10 volumes of it. However, I digress. The day had been wet and glum, and a walk along the old drove roads had drenched us to the skin. So, after a shower and a change of clothes, we worked our way through a fine dinner. Afterwards, we sat in the residence lounge debating on whether to go to the pub or go to the pub. And we just decided to go to the pub when the door opened and what I can only describe as a man entered. Those of you who've read Coleridge's poem, The Ancient Mariner, may remember that once the wedding guest is transfixed by the grey-beard loon with the glittering eye, he has to listen to the entire bloody story top to bottom. So it was with the grey-beard loon that had just come in and was now leaning against the sideboard with its pot Alsatian dog, its pot spaniel and its pot little girl holding up her skirts to dance. "I'd have been a millionaire now if it weren't for bloody Churchill," he spouted into an otherwise silent room. As opening remarks go, that one was fairly interesting and had me wondering whether he'd lost his millions in a kind of 3-card brag to that cigar-smoking, cherubic old war dog. We adopted the embarrassed English person position, and instead of getting up and manhandling him roughly through the front door, we pretended to be engrossed in our books. Welsh spoon designers of the 18th century and diseases of poultry, some answers. "The robbing bastard. No wonder he could afford cigars," was the second episode in which we now understood was to be an epic. "He's not here," I said, hoping to divert him. "Who?" he asked. "Churchill. He's not here. He's staying at the Glendower Arms up the road." "He's dead," the grey-beard loon replied, obviously not want to be diverted. "Oh, that Churchill, Sunday painter, made walls, bombed Dresden and all that." "The very one. He robbed me of my rightful fortune." "How was that then?" my companion asked, cutting to the quick, obviously wanting to get back to his book and find out what to do if one of his Rhode Island leghorns ever got beak wobble, or wing alopecia, or wattle droop. "Sticky bomb," was the answer. Sticky bomb was also the question. I'm the man who invented the sticky bomb. Suddenly the pub was starting to seem a long, long way away. In situations like this, I've been known to feign a fainting fit or to invent a long-lost companion that I've suddenly spotted across a crowded room, but we were trapped. And worse still, my companion had decided that the man was worth talking to. How was that then? "It was in the war, and I was playing with my little lad. He had a toy tank and some soldiers. Then, well, you know what little boys are like. He produced a giant bogey from his nose and tried to flick it off. It stuck to the tank and he tried to shake it off, but it wouldn't shake off and it suddenly struck me. Another bogey? No, I had a thought. What about if bombs stuck to tanks like that? What about if I could make a grenade that would stink to the wall of a tank? I looked out of the window to see if it was open, but it had been painted shut in the 30s. There was no escape and my friend was hooked now like a trout on a fat worm in a flood. "So what did you do?" he asked, and there was no trace of sarcasm in the question. I, on the other hand, had conjured up in my mind the vision of millions of civilians collecting nasal membrane detritus for the war effort, along with aluminium pans and iron railings. Posters proclaiming bogies against Hitler would have adorned the walls of rural post offices. School children would have been given prizes for the biggest snot collection. Pathé newsreels would have shown plucky English villagers cheering off their bogey collection as it rattled out of the village on the backs of lorries driven by cheery British Tommies smoking woodbines. But I said nothing. I got a stick and a tin grenade and covered it with the kind of glue they put on fly paper, and I threw it at the side of my car. Did it work? Not at first. It took me a lot of goes before I got it right. By which time your car was covered in dead flies, I offered. We were at war, he glared back at me. We all had to make sacrifices. Any road up, I eventually got the mix right and sent all my research papers to Churchill at the War Office. He wrote back and said they were interesting, but he didn't think my ideas were of any use. Then before I knew it, they were all over the place. Sticky bombs? He nodded. Stocked a lot of tanks, did my sticky bombs, and I never made a penny out of it. Do you not think somebody else at the MOD might have come up with the same idea, I suggested, remembering how in the late 70s I had invented the CD while drunk in Inverness, only to find out that Philips, the electronics giant, had got there first. No, it was my idea they took. You couldn't get a roll of fly paper for the rest of the war. Churchill robbed me of my patent. I would have been worth millions. Won the war in my sticky bombs, but I never made a penny out of it. You invent anything else? My mate asked. Plastic dog do. What were you going to do with that? Drop it in front of the Jerrys. Very particular about their boots, the Jerrys. Slow down their advance. But wouldn't they suss that they were false? 1 in 20 would be real. Jerry could never have relaxed. I sent one to Stalin too. Could have saved Leningrad, my plastic dog turds. The woman of the house called him from the kitchen. He made a move. We saw a light between him and the door and fled to the pub. There was nobody there all that long night but us and the landlord. Remind me to tell you sometime how he invented underground airplanes and dehydrated water. And actually, though that's embellished a little bit, the basic story about the guy who reckoned he'd invented the sticky bomb is absolutely true. Bored the crutch off us for about 4 hours.